Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start with a story from when our OP was in his late 20s, working as a wireman and also doing some side gigs as a mechanic. One day after a long day of work, he found himself at Walmart browsing for a few items and met a Karen. Fired from Walmart. So at the time this happened, I was in my late 20s and was working as a wireman and moonlighting as a mechanic. As a result of my 2 jobs and a few other factors, I've ended up with a key ring to put a janitor to shame. Apparently this would come into play later on. After a particularly long day, I'd gone to Walmart to pick up a few things and had wandered back towards the electronics part of the store. Standing there with my earpods in, listening to music and looking for a replacement phone case, this lady walked halfway up between being next to me and being behind me. I'm in my own little world comparing cases, and by a habit I picked up when I was a librarian's assistant, I was also putting random cases back where they belong while trying to find what I needed. This lady started rattling away about something that I couldn't hear, and after saying something to get my attention a couple of times, she tapped me on the shoulder. Turning around, I removed one pod so I could hear her, and she repeated herself asking me where something was. I replied I had no idea, and went back to what I was doing. This apparently did not sit well with the resident Karen, and she stormed off to find the manager. Some 20 minutes later, I find my way to the camping section for some other item I needed. From the far end of the aisle, here comes Karen, with a poor, befuddled manager in tow, pointing me out, squawking away about something I couldn't hear. As they approached, I see she's pointing at me, and the manager takes over, finally putting on his big boy pants. Again, I remove my pods to see what they have come to disturb me with. The manager asked me why I refused to help earlier. I replied that it's not my job to help someone find something they couldn't find on their own. Apparently this was the wrong reply, and he proceeds to chew me up one side and down the other. At this point, I realize what's going on, and I halfway play along while trying to contain my fitful laughter. He tells me I need to turn my keys in, that I'm suspended until further notice. After a flippant and dismissive comment from me, the manager then proceeds to do his best impression of a cartoon character's volcanic explosion of anger and lets loose. Apparently, I am fired effective immediately and can no longer apply to work for any Walmart ever again. I can no longer contain myself and start laughing hysterically while I tell him I don't work here. He tells me that of course I don't, he just fired me. I then clarified and tell him I never worked for Walmart ever. Never even applied. At this stage, the local Karen has turned several shades of embarrassingly red, and the manager has joined her, his anger fleeing faster than a track star when he realizes his mistake. Still giggling uncontrollably, I grabbed my cart and strolled away while she proceeded to dole out apologies for the entire affair. Plot twist, the manager was really just another customer and was playing along with the Karen because it was the only way he could get rid of her. And our second story. You're going to lie to the police? I'll go along with it, I guess. So I got into a car accident a few days ago. It was minor, but mostly my fault. I was doing a K-turn out of a residential driveway on a busy street, and while backing up, hit a car that was speeding to get past. No airbags were deployed, and both cars were completely drivable. This accident happened about 4:45. In the car was a middle-aged father and mother with a toddler in a car seat in the back next to the door that was hit. His family does not speak English. The father got out of the car and did the immediate "look at my damage" woes that come with an accident. He tells me there's a baby in the back and shows me the still sleeping child. His wife immediately gets on the phone with who I believe is the police. We pull into a parking lot to get off the busy road and wait. About 20 minutes later, I grabbed their hubcap out of the road and handed it to the gentleman, and he opened the back door again and showed me the sleeping baby. It's now about 5:40, and the couple's niece and her boyfriend show up. They immediately demand money to fix the car, and I told them we'll go through insurance. She asked several times if I really want to go that way and told her there's no way I had the money to fix both cars, so insurance it is. She proceeds to call the police at that point. The aunt was on the phone with her and not the police. Fine, I'll wait even longer for the police to come then. Around 6:15, the toddler finally wakes up and starts crying. It's now been asleep for at least an hour and a half and most likely is hungry. At 6:30, the cops show up and ask the niece if the baby needs paramedics, and the niece, who didn't show up until almost an hour after the initial collision, starts to lie to the police about how the baby has been crying since the accident and to send them. I've been in a few accidents over my years as a driver, and now I'm starting to smell what this really is: insurance scam. I looked through my dash cam and was able to prove they sped through a red light right before the driveway where I turned from. When the cop came to ask me what happened, I told him my side of the events and showed him the dash cam proving the light was red in the direction they claimed to be coming from. For good measure, I told the police that the baby only started crying about 15 minutes prior to when they got there. The niece started screaming that I was lying. I then told the police officer, if what she says is true, then I'd like to make a claim against them for child endangerment. They claim that baby was crying for the past 2 hours from the accident, and never once did they call 911 for medical assistance. They called their niece to come here instead of emergency services and only asked for them after they were offered. The car seat also isn't center-mounted like required by state law and should be cited. At that point, the niece is calling me every name in the book like she just found I cheated on her from Jerry Springer. I then calmly tell the officer that my dash cam was running the entire time we were stopped and have it on record when the child woke up. The officer looked at her and said, "Ma'am, it's a crime to lie on a police report. Was the baby crying since the accident?" All of a sudden, she now had to check with her aunt and uncle to find out. She withdrew her claim and the officer tossed out her witness statement because she wasn't an actual witness to anything. Hopefully no bullcrap lawsuit comes from it. Everyone needs front and rear dash cams these days. Do you know if someone hits you after running a red light, all they have to do is claim you ran it? Without a dash cam, you're looking at least 50% at fault. Good for you. And our next story. Evil HOA is targeting us. We've had an ongoing issue with our HOA that primarily involves problems with builders. We purchased our home 2 years ago, and in that time, there's been near continuous construction on 6 homes adjacent to us or across the street. The subcontractors are constantly leaving trash on our property, including nails and sharp pieces of metal. We live at around 9,000 feet elevation, so about 7 months of the year we have snow on the ground, and the road's blocked so the snowplows can't clear the road properly because of junk and vehicles. All of the homes are done except for the one next to us, although we have 2 more empty lots that'll most likely have construction start in summer of 2024, and I dread it. The house next door has had trash dumped all over, trash trailers overflowing with nails, screws, and food waste, which attracts foxes, bears, and moose. We live in a really nice neighborhood with expensive homes. But that didn't stop the builder next door from dumping a broken-down refrigerated deli-style cooler on our property, or the 2 separate occasions that broken microwaves were left less than 20 feet from the side of our house on our lot. The builder across the street had a subcontractor dump a bucket from a tile job into the wetlands area on our property. When I complained to him, he told me that it wasn't even our property, told me I was lying, and then he told me to F off. I then sent him the Sentry video from my Tesla, they record constantly, and my husband reminded me that the camera was running and it showed everything. The subs block access to our driveway constantly, and the contractors are allowing subcontractors to store their trailers and equipment on the roads. Materials are strewn everywhere, including flammable and combustible liquids stored out in the open. The fire hydrant on the corner of the contractor's next door property is blocked. Since we live in the mountains, fire's a very real danger. He's in violation of a variety of town ordinances. An insulation truck with a diesel generator has been making the rounds of the new construction, and the generator is belching out toxic diesel fumes. Not normal levels, something's wrong with it, and there's no filtration. Another contractor says it's missing the catalytic converter. It was so bad recently that we had to leave our home for several days because it was causing headaches and made our dog sick. Being in the mountains, we don't have central AC, so during the summer we have to leave the windows open for ventilation. This went on for about 3 weeks on and off. I reported these on several occasions to the HOA. They told me that they could only enforce rules on homeowners, not builders. The builder's building the home for himself, will live in it 2 years, then sell it, so he is the homeowner. I asked the HOA to come visit and walk the site, but they flat out refused to even respond to my email. After I called, they refused to talk about it and told me I needed to take it up with the architectural committee, so I requested to present at the next meeting. I brought our plan showing the material laydown, trash mitigation plan, and subcontractor parking plan. I also brought a big bag of trash I pulled from our 0.8-acre lot. When I arrived for the public meeting, I was told that I wasn't welcome until my appointment started. When it was my turn, I presented them with a 12-page document with photos showing the site and the trash. I was scolded like a child and told there was nothing they could do because the HOA is not in the business of enforcement. As I left the meeting, I heard laughter as I walked out the door. I opened the door and told them that I heard them. Classy, I said. It turned out that the builder is the brother of the HOA president. Now I see why they're so protective of him and ignore his construction site. I was also called 2 months later while we were out having dinner with friends by the compliance officer, the same one I'd complained to originally, who told me they would not enforce the rules, who told me that our dogs were barking inside our house and that she was going to call animal control and the sheriff. I figured out it was the same lady and told her never to contact me again for any reason. I feel like I'm being targeted. Other residents' dogs bark constantly, but we're the ones they feel the need to harass and threaten. I've given up reporting the contractors, but it's not fair to live this way. We moved from Texas, where you can build a house in 6 months or less. The contractor next door is going on 3 years now. And our last story. And our next story. Neighbors attack old man because he has a camera in his window. I was in high school at the time this happened. I'm 22 now, so this was a couple years ago. My grandfather had picked me up as my mother was working late that night, so I went to stay at his house till my mother finished and she could pick me up. It was the usual day at first. I would play the Mega Drive game collection on Xbox 360 and have my dinner the usual time, but while I was playing my game, it went all wrong. There was a knocking at the door, which my grandparents curiously answered. It was the next-door neighbors, 2 grown men, which had caused issues with my grandfather in the past. They were yelling about a camera being pointed at their back garden. The camera they were talking about was a small indoor TV antenna so you could watch basic TV channels in that room, the room I was in at the time. The men were trying to push their way upstairs past my grandparents, which in turn caused them to nearly hurt my grandfather in the process. He was military back when he was younger, so he was able to push them back a little. Meanwhile, I was freaking out, scared that if they saw me, they'd hurt me too. I was making plans in my head to run into another bedroom and lock the door so they wouldn't find me. Luckily for this story, the police were called. The men tried to say my grandfather had punched them while inquiring about the camera, but a fault in their story being they admitted to jumping a small brick wall that split their garden and my grandparents' driveway. This caused the police to suspect them for going over with bad intentions. I talked to the police, who came into the room to check to make sure it wasn't a camera and to make sure I was okay. Charges were filed, and soon the evil neighbor was forced to rent a new apartment, much farther from my family's home. My grandfather had a camera installed after that. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.